Serie, the strongest being in the Frieren anime, has one fatal flaw, and it could cost her everything. Serie enters the scene with a bang, and throughout the series, with several morally questionable antics, solidifies herself as the strongest anti-hero in Frieren. But she's also surprisingly vulnerable, and in this video, we'll explore the complex character of Serie and how the strongest being in Frieren anime can still be a vulnerable target of an assassination plot. Serie is introduced late in Frieren, but she arrives in the most legendary, almost mythical way possible. And that's kinda on brand with her, because talking about how strong Serie is, she's practically a god, an unstoppable force in the Frieren universe. In Frieren anime episode 20, Serie is introduced into the series as a living grimoire. She's said to know nearly every spell in humanity's history. Just imagine the sheer power of someone with limitless magical knowledge. And also remember, in the Frieren universe, magic is practically limited only by a person's visual imagination. So with proper knowledge of the world, the sky's the limit. And Serie might be not that far from that sky. Also, speaking a bit of simple lore in Frieren, age plays a huge role in magic power. In a nutshell, in Frieren, age is power. Some spells can only be learned over centuries of learning, and mana levels usually also grows as training goes. So if you think Frieren, a 1000-plus-year-old elf, is sold, Serie might as well be a dinosaur. Because Frieren's full-blown mana level is around Serie's concealed level of mana. And Serie's ability to hide her mana makes her even more dangerous because it is implied that she does it better than Frieren. So who knows how large her mana capacity actually is. If we refer to Serie's fight with Mach, the strongest enemy Frieren faced in the series, he's essentially just an unruly toddler in Serie's eyes. And oh, I bet she can absolutely ruin Mach, but she didn't. We'll talk about this later, so keep that in mind. And more about Serie, having this strong of a character in the series sounds boring, right? And that's probably why Serie is also a certified third bag. She's not even being racist, everyone gets some, but Frieren gets more. She tried to replace Frieren as first master, goaded one of her apprentices to try kill Frieren, and that's not all. She ripped up Clama's will in front of Frieren, she's a magic elitist, she believes magic should only be accessible to a select few, and of course, even though she could do a lot in the Demon King War, she didn't, just because she's rather fight rather than living in the peaceful era. You see, Serie's action might seem beneficial to humanity at times, but they're not driven by noble values. She doesn't care. In short, a textbook anti-hero. Although sometimes perform actions that most of the audience considers morally correct, the reasons for doing so might not align with the audience's morality. This is Serie, the worst boss you can ever imagine, a capable jerkface you can't even talk back because she's usually right. And even me saying that brings back PTSD. And with all that, fortunately, Serie isn't just another side character, because her story dives deep into fascinating and surprising contradictions, even to a wild possibility of how a group of people can confidently plot to assassinate a god himself. Because aside from that strength, Serie has one glaring weakness. Serie's love for magic is undeniable, but it's wrapped in contradictions she may not fully understand. Because think about it, why accepting human apprentices in the first place? Look, unlike Frieren, who cherishes the process of learning magic itself, Serie's connection to magic looks much more pragmatic and elitist. So why Continental Magic Association? Well, of course, the grueling and incredibly strict test goes in line with Serie's ideals, but she definitely could do better. Especially that, why human apprentices? You see, there are several theories on this. They're legit, trust me bro. The first theory, Serie's just bored out of her mind. Look, elves in Frieren will do weird things, grandiose, mundane, or even outright batshit insane things to pass the time. There's even an elf who trolls people for decades. Compared to that, creating a magic association seems reasonable. And second theory, the most basic one, is that Serie loves magic and wants to see it flourish. Yeah, doesn't even count as a theory to be honest, it's just a general broad fact. And the third theory? Okay, how do I say this? Serie is a...
Mother flippin' tsundere.
And yeah, the last two are made up. Gotta lengthen that watch time, baby! Okay, hear me out. Serie has a pattern of selecting apprentices who are either incredibly talented, highly ambitious, and or pragmatic. But usually, talent comes first. One of her disciples, and arguably the most successful one, is Flaw, a legend. Hot legend. Probably the most accomplished human mage in the series, and guess what? Even her is a failure according to Serie. So maybe why Serie puts so much emphasis on talent, because Serie's realm of power is beyond hard work. Humans need innate talent to achieve Serie's standards. Hard work doesn't suffice. Makes sense. One question though, then why human apprentices? Why not, I don't know, elves? Frieren, a dwarf perhaps? I mean, 3 of the great mages are elves. But I think if you watch the anime, you know why it's human apprentices. And you know, even without Zerius knowing, maybe her purpose is different than what she has in mind. The answer lies in her memories, that a fraction of it is shown in episode 28. In episode 28, Frieren and Zerius stand in an indoor garden, and Frieren notices something unusual. The garden itself is created through magic. Zerius' sharp-tongued pragmatism make this extravagant, magical creation seem out of place. And not just some random spell, it's crafted using Flamma's favorite spell. If you're new here, Flamma is Zerius' apprentice and Frieren's mentor, and curious about that, Frieren asks why. And Zerius' response is really telling. Of course, she calls Flamma a failure, but even so, Serie remembers every detail about her apprentices, their favorite spells, their personalities, and she admits she's never regretted taking them on. For someone so aloof, this quiet care reveals a softer side she's unwilling to acknowledge. And honestly, I think the Continental Magic Association isn't just about elitism. Of course, there's elitism and Serie's ideals are practically the culture there. But I think what Serie doesn't realize, it's also Serie's way to indulging her love for mentoring apprentices. Maybe she wants to feel the connection she had with Flamma again? I don't know. We don't know Serie that deep, sadly. But what we know is that she's far too dense to admit that she cares. Classic Tsundere vibes. But here's where things get interesting. Serie's love for her apprentices isn't just a quirky personality trait, it's also her Achilles heel. As much as she tries to downplay it, this care is what makes her vulnerable. And some people are more than willing to exploit that vulnerability. Now let's talk about the looming assassination plot against Serie. The Shadow Warriors, a multi-race traitors organization, have set their sights on her. It sounds absurd, like seriously, who would dare challenge Serie? But if you follow my narrative, Serie's love for her apprentices put her in more danger. Well, okay, I know, it sounds cliche AF, but just hear me out, okay? We don't have full details on the assassination strategy, but we know that Shadow Warriors are really coordinated, really skilled, pragmatic, and some of them are tasked to keep Serie's bodyguards busy. But the real question is, why do they think they even have a chance? In Frieren series, for centuries, elves were seen as untouchable, immortal in power, not just lifespan. But that belief shattered 20 years ago. Minos, another elven great mage, was killed, proving that even the so-called immortal elves weren't invincible. And the one rumored to have killed him? Luva, the leader of this assassination mission. So at first glance, their confidence comes from, well, rumor. Even some of the Shadow Warriors acknowledge this. This is kind of risky move, but if you're Luva, the man who supposedly killed an elf of that caliber, you might start to become optimistic. And maybe, even without Luva knowing, Serie's own nature is what makes this assassination attempt more than just a dream. For the longest time, we've underestimated how much Serie loves her apprentices. The more we know Serie, the more Serie let it slip. The most obvious one is that we see this in chapter 140. Serie has chosen an unusual lineup for bodyguards. She picked the weirder bunch from her apprentices. Some of them, in her eyes, are disappointments, destined never to become powerful mages. And yet she still chooses them to be her bodyguard, waiting to see what future awaits them. You see, even as she preaches about talent, strength, pragmatism, her actions tell a different story. And this isn't the first time we've seen this side of Serie. Back in chapter 93, Serie fought Macht effortlessly. Until 2 of her apprentices arrived, told her to stop because they still need Macht alive, and then she just stopped. And just like that, while grumbling, she walked away. So the question is why? Some might say it was a strategic move that she was agreeing with her apprentices that they need Macht alive. But this is Serie. Why come here in the first place then? Isn't that weird? This is my interpretation, following what we've talked about so far. If she kept fighting, she wasn't just risking herself, she was risking them. And by thinking about Serie this way, lots of things about Serie throughout the series become clear. Or maybe I did too much mental gymnastic on Serie. Whatever. What are your thoughts about this? But the point is this, what I'm trying to convey is, it's this care that creates a crack in her otherwise impenetrable armor. Serie might be untouchable in fight, but her apprentices are not. The Shadow Warriors don't need to overpower her and her bodyguards from the beginning. They just need to use her apprentices against her to make Serie lower her guard. Come on, between Serie and her apprentices, who's really protecting who? Honestly, you can think of Serie as what Frieren could have ended up being if she hadn't met Himmel. Serie's story is a paradox. She's a god among mortals, but her love for her apprentices reveals her deepest vulnerability. Her elitism drives her decisions, but her care for others define her actions. But the main thing that connects Serie's story is, just like Frieren, who changed because of the people around her, Serie's relationship with her apprentices reveal a different side of her, a side that even she might not fully understand. Serie built her life on the idea that magic should be for the elite, that power is everything. But in the end, it wasn't power that defined her story. It was the people she surrounded herself with.